welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And welcome to yet another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman, the show that just won't die.
Oh, we're in for it tonight, folks.
Well, it won't, though.
No. It's like life.
It just goes on and on and on.
Until it does.
Until it doesn't. Well, tonight we are going to talk about problems. And the thought I want to kind of sow a seed for right now in the very beginning of the program is our quote. And it's very simple, so I'm going to do it so I won't screw it up much. And it's from our favorite Eckhart Tolle, and it goes like this. You are not a problem that needs solving. And we all know that's not true, because all of you people are problems that need solving.
We are all problems.
You guys are a wreck. You're just a mess. There's just nothing we can do with you. That's not true. But here's I want to add something to it. You are not a problem, but me is a problem.
Oh.
I have to think about that for a second or two. It sounds like a sort of a conundrum.
Well, I would put my own version in.
Oh, go, please.
You are not a problem. I am a problem.
I'm not going to touch that.
I in air quotes.
I in air quotes. So what are we talking about? We're talking about well, let's go right back to it. People actually spend a lot of their lives, unfortunately, a lot of their lives thinking about problems. And oftentimes when people think everything is going right, rather, here they are relaxing, let's say sitting on a beach or on vacation, wherever they may be, and in the back of your mind, unfortunately, rather than enjoying the moment that you're in, this moment of relaxation and sunshine and whatever, a problem will crop up. And sometimes this is also analogous, Margaret, to when the Buddhists will say during meditation, in the beginning of a meditation perhaps, a thought will come in. The problem is a thought, and it crops up in your mind, and it sort of almost demands attention. And it has a voice. It says, you really ought to be checking in with the XYZ thing, or you better go on your phone and see if there's anything happening at work, and that payment that's due last week, and it could be anything. It's a whole series of just, almost it seems almost intentional, or it's on the same order as a sort of let's say a pet that's hungry, to be oddly specific, because we have a hungry pet, and when that hungry pet wants something to eat, it wants to insert itself into any situation without regard. The thought comes up into your mind as though to steal your peace, to steal your joy, to kind of take you out of the moment. And the problem, whatever it may be, will try to assume paramount importance in your mind. It says this has to be solved, this has to be thought about, this right now. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you're relaxing, you're just wasting your time, you should be thinking about this. This is important. If this doesn't get thought about right this very moment, disaster will ensue, or anything could happen.
The world ends. The
world could end. And so problems seem to have sort of a life of their own. They seem to sort of lie in wait for an idle moment, or a moment of bliss or enjoyment, and they want to jump right in and make sure that you can't enjoy it. And so people say, well, if only I could get rid of all my problems, then I could have peace. And that's an interesting sort of turnaround of what's actually happening here, because it's obvious on its surface that there is no way that you could get rid of, quote unquote, get rid of all your problems. Mainly because life continues, and there will always be another bill or an incident or another thing that you should be doing that you're not doing. That's kind of a given. And in the moment of now, when you can't do any of those things, you're sitting on a beach, you're in your shorts and watching the waves go by. Those things come in. Oh, next week you got to do this, Y, and X, Y, Z, and this will happen or that'll happen, or this one said this and that one said this, and it takes you completely out of that moment. It basically can, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, it can ruin any situation. And if you happen to be sitting on the beach or sitting wherever you're sitting with company, oftentimes they'll look at you and say, well, what are you thinking about? What's the matter? Because your whole expression, your whole energy will change. You will no longer be in the moment of relaxing. You'll be fidgety, or you'll be scowling, or you'll be tapping your foot, or just, you obviously are now outside of the moment. You're in the past or in the future, or you're worrying about something. There's another good analogy, or not analogy, but situation. People wake up in the middle of the night, lying in their warm bed, staring at the ceiling, worrying about something. Almost from the blissful unconsciousness of a warm, dreamless sleep, woken up in the middle of the night to worry. By what? What does that to you?
It's usually 2 or 3 in the morning when that happens.
The time you walk the floor, so to speak. And so Tolle is talking about here is you are not a problem that needs solving. And the abstract of that is something we also had, we couldn't find a quote about it, but also heard Margaret was watching a Tolle's, one of his videos. And he spoke about something called the dilemma of me. And what was the phrase exactly? Do you recall it?
Yes. He was speaking about the mindset and how people are constantly turning around a problem, but they basically treat themselves as a problem. So it is finding a solution to the dilemma of me. And it's an interesting thought, because you don't really think about how you think of yourself. You're thinking, in this case, he's describing thinking of yourself as a dilemma to be solved. I'm looking at this, and I believe that I'm this way. Mm-hmm. And how do I express myself in this moment? And it's all in the mental realm.
I'm too short. I'm too tall.
Well, how do I solve this problem of I need more?
Right. More resources.
I need more something.
Right.
It could be almost anything.
People don't respect me. It's all, and these sort of hyper criticisms are all internal. Yet they're oftentimes heard in what appears to be not your own voice. That's the other thing about the dilemma of me, is that, a dilemma is, you've heard of those expressions, the horns of a dilemma. It usually is expressed as a problem which requires solving, but it also can be talked about as a problem which has 2 solutions. You have to choose one. But the dilemma of me is that there is a me. And then maybe there's other voices within you that are also speaking, either criticizing the me or finding fault with the me. And the me is arguing back. I couldn't do this. Or you can have we've talked about this in the past, you can have this whole kind of back and forth conversation about how terrible you are, and you always do this in this situation, and why do you always say these wrong words and make people upset? And then you say, well, I couldn't help myself, and you're having a whole interlocutory dialogue, where you're being basically put on trial, and your past sins are being recalled, and you're getting cross-examined.
Well, it's
by who?
It is all these different aspects of you.
Yes.
That have an opinion, which I find fascinating.
Which is fascinating.
You honestly believe that an ego, your ego, oh, I must have one opinion. It's like, no, let's just really look at it.
Right.
You're horrified when you discover that you have multiple opinions. It's just which one is going to be able to control the mouth enough to throw its opinion out to the world. So it's a fascinating process because you've basically at that point subdivided your me into multiple opinions or viewpoints. And when you think about, who's going to be able to control the mouth? It's like when you think of the argument on who's driving the car. I want to drive because of this. I want to drive here. Well, I don't want to go there. I want to go over here. Well, no, I don't like either the way you both drive. I'll drive. It's like, okay. All this is happening in a space internal, and it's not even outside. So I always like to look at people's faces when they're thinking about something, because you see flashes of these different opinions,
personae,
just rolling across their face in multiple expressions. And you can almost hear the argument going on when you're watching this, because it's exhausting.
And sometimes you're right; it does break out into the open. That internal dialogue. So where does it come from? There's a whole discussion we can have there. Maybe we'll go off into that. But in essence, that internal dialogue can have some of the characteristics of a schizophrenic kind of dialogue.
Yeah. Lovely.
Oftentimes if you've been at an early age, internalized criticism about who you are or who you should have been or what you could have been. If only I had done this, if only I had done that, if only I had listened to this one or only I had listened to that one. Or the back of your head, there's always a voice saying, you're never good enough. You're always lazy. You're always thinking about yourself. You're never thinking about others. You should do this and you should do that. And this voice, this sort of hectoring, haranguing voice, can be internalized from perhaps a parent or some other authority figure. But once it becomes an internal voice, it no longer, that person can be the person who may have been the original, I hesitate to say perpetrator, but the original owner of that voice may be long gone. You may not have seen them in 30 years, but yet their persona has taken up residence within your psyche. How does it do that? How does it actually have sort of an actual presence, or what appears to be an actual presence? Because again, these types of, let's call them problems, but these types of criticisms or voices seem to arise in much the same way emotions arise, sort of unbidden or triggered by something. If you're sitting, let's say, on a beach, and again, watching the waves and thinking about nothing, you're in the moment of now. Whether you know it or not, you're just in awareness. There's nothing that's bothering you. And yet, sort of unbidden, and this experience happens to a lot of people, something will crop up in your head. Where does that come from? Or some voice will say, what are you doing there, you lazy bum? You ought to go do this. You ought to go do this. Why are you wasting your time And you go, oh, and if you aren't careful, you'll react to it. Margaret was talking about, your expression will change, flashes of emotion may come over you. You may suddenly feel angry or afraid or just annoyed, and then you're sitting there and nothing's coming out of your mouth, and then someone else who might be on the beach comes up to you and says hi, and you go, what do you mean by that? What? Hey, you react in such a way as to display an untoward amount of emotion or an untoward amount of reaction, because internally you're not present in the moment of where you are right now. You're not on the beach watching the waves, relaxing. You're all keyed up, having an internal argument that no one else can hear, and yet that person who comes into your presence immediately gets plugged into the argument, and perhaps you will react badly or unconsciously. So that's the dilemma of the me, and he says me, but it's the dilemma of me's. There's far too many of them, and some of those me's, Margaret, will be saying this other thing. They'll be saying that you're a problem, that you are the problem, that you need to be solved. That what you're doing is wrong, and what you've always done is wrong, and you should be doing this, and you should be in a different job, and you should have higher pay, and it goes on and on and on. And it doesn't leave you a moment's peace.
Well, part of that, I believe, is that people aren't really trained to understand how their emotions rise up and fall.
True.
Because emotions in general have a wave-like motion. They rise up from below, and it can take you by surprise when they do that, by the way. And then you have a peak, and then it abates. And I have not really seen people teaching other people how to manage this, truly, to be aware of the fact that you're feeling in this particular way right now. And you as a human being, this is an internal fight that only you can handle. But you have other people on the outside that are trying to handle it for you. And that's usually the case when it comes to children. They suddenly are angry about something. And you always see an adult there trying to, well, you shouldn't be angry, or, you cannot respond that way. That's not
acceptable.
Well, appropriate for the moment.
Right.
Et cetera. It goes down the line. But within that interaction, there are so many sub-things going on, because the parent is triggered because suddenly the child is acting in a way that they deem badly, and now I'm being embarrassed in front of all these other people because my child isn't behaving, and then it amps that up. So the reaction is usually overly expressed.
I mean, in that situation, that's a really good one, because when a parent feels embarrassed by their child, the reason that they do is somewhere there's a voice, there's a me internally that's saying, what kind of parent are you? Look at what your child is doing. You should do this. You should do that. You shouldn't let them act out like that. That the whole internal critical dialogue that arises up when you see parents acting badly with their children is because all before that it was internal, and then it comes out as the external.
Well, it's a very interesting thing, because usually when the child is having a tantrum, let's say, especially if they're little, like 2 years old, 2 or 3, you give them the timeout, but the timeout is so that they can sit down and they have to work through this. They've got to be able to understand that this is what I'm feeling right now. I'm not happy with it, and try to manage the emotion. just being told that you're not, you can't be angry because of that doesn't help.
Right. Exactly right.
So that's what I'm seeing, is that most adults have never come to that point of realizing that the emotion has got to rise and fall. Usually what happens is there's some outside person demanding, now you pay attention to me while you're going through that emotional trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Truth of the matter is they need to be left alone in that emotional trigger. And a lot of people have learned that they can learn to manipulate people through emotional triggers.
Oh, yes.
So understanding that for yourself, if you're getting this rise of emotion, it's like, okay, time out. I'm going over here. I'm going to get a hold of myself. You know, and I like that phrase. I'm getting a hold of myself.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because internally, that basically expresses the internal struggle that's going on who's going to talk. That's the struggle over who's got power over the mouth. And it's fascinating because it's like giving yourself space enough to allow the emotions to flow through you, because emotions must flow through you. If you stopper it, like some parents say, well, to the child, you're not allowed to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the worst thing you could possibly do. Emotions must be let go. And we're down here to experience all of it, but you have to be put into this space where the emotion can be felt, but you're not going to hurt anybody and you're not going to hurt yourself.
You're not going to act on it.
And that's the true definition of a safe space, not this other stuff that they're saying this is a safe space. No. True definition of a safe space is that you're allowed to feel exactly what you're feeling in that moment without interruption, and you're not going to allow the emotion to take hold of you and govern your actions. That's safe space. You need that space so that you can process this. And teaching that, just that simple technique, as well as allowing the child to see that they can actually do this, is a very empowering thing.
We notice that what you just said is very important, because I believe the safe space that people talk about is a space that they give you. In fact, the safe space is something that you give yourself. It is totally within you, and the space that you're giving is space for your emotions.
Yes, because emotions are very strong.
Yes.
Okay. And people think the emotions are the only thing that's real because that's what they're feeling. But what that means is that they weren't allowed to feel this and let it go. It means that they hold the emotions right back in and they're holding it. Like, no, you can't do that. Let it go. Flows, emotion flows like water.
Right.
If you tried to stop her, okay, you let it all go. Now you're trying to bring all that water back in. You know, it's like, would you have a kiddie pool that you just whoop into? It doesn't work. No. You certainly can't carry that around.
But isn't that so? When people don't let their emotions go, they carry them around. Some people want to hold on to them, and they become chronic, or what do they call refractory emotions, because they feel powerful, especially with anger, perhaps. The other example that you mentioned is that oftentimes, let's say, you're told as a child, you can't feel sad. I don't want you to feel sad. You mustn't feel sad. Or you shouldn't be angry. You mustn't be angry. I don't want you to be angry. Both of those things, if they become internalized, turn into me's. They turn into voices in your head that, in essence, repeat that same mantra. When anger comes up, rather than giving it space, you have a me inside you, which is no longer the parent or no longer the authority voice, but it's still with the same sort of power, crushes your emotion, stoppers it up. Or if it finally breaks free, it breaks free with such raging force that it overwhelms the me's, but it also becomes its own little me, its own little tirade of torrent rather of rage, or this just overwhelming sadness that just overtakes you entirely, or these emotions which are stoppered are this is always a bad word, but the quote-unquote negative emotions. So I just want to digress for a minute. Emotions have been labeled oftentimes as positive or negative. None of those things are true. All your emotions are really equally important for the humanity of you, for the humanity of your being, for your incarnation here. Emotions are used as a variety of forms of communication amongst our species on this planet, and even amongst various species on this planet. So, the emotion is part of your incarnation. It's a physical thing. It's power. It's energy. When you use the mind to stuff down or to break or stopper an emotion, because that's what's happening here. The mind is being used to muffle the emotion. You put them at odds with each other. They both get a me. You have the emotional me that's ranting and raging, and you have the mental me, which is hectoring and telling you not to do and do this and do that and do the other thing. Maybe there's 7 of them and 3 of the other guys, and they all clamor for your attention, you being the being. And as you said, Margaret, which one gets the mouth? Which one gets the hand? Which one gets to throw the thing? Which one gets to scream?
Mm-hmm.
And you see this, in children, and you can train them at that point, to give the space to the emotional me, or not make it a me, but give the space to emotion, because it will rise and fall like a wave, like your heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Allow yourself to use the mind, but don't make the mind into another voice that tells you what to do or tries to become your persona. But unfortunately, all those things happen to people if they aren't given these tools, and they all stand up inside you and battle it out like a bunch of crazy people.
Just terrible.
Until one seizes the microphone and screams something.
Right. Well, that's why, you've been in situations where suddenly if the quiet person, you always say watch the quiet ones, the quiet person has suddenly balled up all these reactions and emotions, and when they finally let loose, it's about something that happened like a week or 2 ago, and it's just this anger, and nobody understands a word of what is actually going on. It's a very serious level of incoherency.
And it's debilitating.
Mm-hmm. And so nothing gets resolved. It's a pressure valve that just is released at that moment.
Mm.
But in order to handle a situation, it takes a level of maturity, and it means that you understand you and all the madness that's going on in you.
Mm.
But the thing is, with Tolle, he was talking about the way you think about you. Because when you're looking at it in terms of, I'm broken up into these different pieces and I'm trying to fit myself together, you're thinking of you as a thing or an object. That is the mindset of solving things is always object-based.
Mm-hmm.
You are a being. You are more than that. In other words, the exercise he talks about is being aware of the silence between the words. Because you have to understand that the silence between the words is the whole foundation of allowing the words to be. Without that space, the words will not exist. So there is an exercise in I think it's one of the Buddhist meditations, where you literally have to become aware of the space between the word.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why they chant the Om, because the Om is made up of 4 components. The Ah, which is the initial sound that comes through the lips. The Ah, which is the fullness of the mouth. And then the lips close and makes the and then the silence. And to abide in that silence. This is the reason why the chant does that. Is to allow you to come into fullness of creation. It is an analogy of what creation is, that things rise up and fall back down, and then they rise up again. So it's that wave form. To understand that that's who you are as a consciousness. Things you are observing that form rise up out of nothingness, come to fullness, come to an end, and then descend back into nothingness. And then you do it again. And it's understanding that your consciousness observes this. You are not the the or the You are actually the silence, the being state. But you participate in this realm, which is what the Om actually is.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's exactly right. And, I was reminded of another talk we gave where when we were talking about all these personae, and I believe the phrase was, who's listening? If all these voices are talking in your head, there's also a being there, the silence.
Right.
Now, there's two things about the silence. There's the being within which these voices occur, or there's the being within which the words, all thoughts, all emotions too, but all thoughts occur. And then, as Margaret very, very wisely said, there's a silence. There's a silence in between each thought. How do you know? Well, if all your thoughts were happening at once, it would be terribly confusing. Number one, and it would be it would be an incoherent babble. It would be a cacophony. You would be paralyzed. You probably would just fall over in a stupor.
Overload.
But yet each thought, even all the me's, take turns. They all don't talk at once. Or the whole point of it is that they're arguing with each other. Well, the space within which they argue, the space which they vie for control of, is the actual person, is the actual being.
Consciousness.
The consciousness. The other thing I was just reminded when you said about the Aum, which is always a beautiful analogy, because it is, I believe the Buddhists call it the sound of creation.
Right, the sound of the universe.
The sound of the universe. So there's also the beautiful analogy of creation in the Bible, where in essence God goes through a whole bunch of machinations from the void, from nothingness, creates the whole universe, and then what? Rests.
Right.
Resting is the silence.
Yes.
So from the void comes creation, and then there's a rest.
Yes.
This shows that creation wasn't a linear act. It wasn't starting at a beginning and coming to an end and say, "Oh, good, we're done." No, it's a circle, or it's a spiral, or it's a mandala, or a yin yang. It comes around to its beginning, back to this silence. It starts in utter and complete silence, the void. It ends up with creation having occurred, but there's again a silence, and so it mimics these two things. Each expression that we have here of our understanding of what is the actual universe comes through in a different form, but has some basic truths. You can find these things in mathematics too, but the point being is that the void, the zero in mathematics, is extremely important. Without the zero, without the void, if you will, you can't really have any form of a number system. You can have some sort of ordinal system, but without the idea of a zero, it doesn't go very far. With zero, you have both the void, and interestingly enough, you have the infinite. It's contained within zero. So when creation is made, we could say we made from nothing everything, but you return back to the rest, which is that the nothing still contains the everything. The being is where everything actually happens. All of the me's, all of the emotion. And as the being, you have, the being is vast, but in fact, the being is without dimension. It isn't just vast. It's in many ways truthfully infinite. Within your being, all things occur, and by that I mean out to the 13.8 billion light year universe. It all occurs within your being, because there's no place else for it to occur. Within your perception is the only place it all occurs, even all the me's and everything else. It all happens within you, not outside you.
It all happens right here and now.
And it all happens right here and now. That's another whole different discussion, but yes.
No, but I mean, that is the point where eternity is. The here and now, where zero is both origin and end. So, yes, cycles. It's all cycles. But the expressions of who we are, to understand that our life comes in cycles. And problems, if you want to think of problems, will always present themselves repeatedly until we come to a point of resolution, come back to the 0 point. It fills up, when you think you've taken care of something. Oh, didn't I take care of that problem a long time ago? And it comes back and it smacks you in the head. It's like, oh, I didn't take care of that part of the problem. And that's because it's another circle around. It's another rung on the spiral that you have to go up and say, okay, I see it from this perspective now. Let me resolve it this way. Let me try this. let me have more compassion for this person now. That's usually the wise decision, although it may not be the most comfortable decision.
Mm-hmm. Although, I think the term problem is always problematic. Because problems, people personify problems.
You
you are a problem, but truly they give problems their own me's.
Yeah.
A problem acquires a voice. A problem acquires a persona. A problem can be identified with you. Your ego loves not only identifying problems, but identifying with problems. So your ego says, you're always to this or to that or to whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, right there, it's making you the problem.
Well, that's the judgment part of the ego that it enjoys, because it feels that it has power when it makes a judgment call.
Yes.
And it's an interesting thing then of looking at it that way, because not only are you thinking of you or anyone else as a thing or object, but you're classified in terms of a folder that is got the title problems. Mm-hmm. So this is the type of problem you are, because this is the type of problem your personality brings up. Mm-hmm. This is the type of problem that you are. And it's like, it's very interesting, because you're like, it's understanding that is a mindset, that when you look out into the world, then you are all problems. You, collective, are all problems. It's like, yes, there's a lot of problems in this world, but you're more than just the thing or the label I happen to put on you right now. All I can think is that label maker that you're putting on people's foreheads.
Yes. Well, it's certainly a box.
Yes.
If you objectify a person and make them into a problem, And that process is a way of dehumanizing them. We say dehumanizing all the time, but what we really mean is making them not a being and making them a thing.
Right.
You're really in, again, this is a thought or a me or a persona, literally saying to the other or to yourself that you are not a vast, infinite emanation from source. You're just a problem.
Yep.
You belong in this box over here.
This is the box for you. I've got the right box for you. And it's very interesting because whole societies will do this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that people need to be aware of and realize that if a society is going to go up on the next rung, they're going to have to lose that box. They're going to have to lose all those boxes because people are much, much more than the label you give them.
Yeah.
And you can put outrage to one side and a whole bunch of other things because that's all ego realm argument. That's part of your dilemma.
Yes.
And where you need to be, your mindset needs to be in the spaces in between. Being is space consciousness, space mindset. To be able to look at it and just realize, yeah, this person has problems, but so do I.
Yeah.
And that we all need space to process these problems. It's again, going back to the small children. If you allow them that space to be able to work through that internal fight that they're going through when they have strong emotions. And basically, you're letting them sit on the stairs so they can work it out. And when they get up from the stairs, and this is a Jordan Peterson thing, okay? He used to do this with his own son. His son can only get up from the stairs when he's ready and willing to interact with the family. And when he interacts with the family, there's no emotional charge left in the parent because, as Peterson said, you don't like your children all the time. And you have to be very aware of that because you will make decisions towards your child with that dislike as its foundation. And you would be amazed at the decisions you make with that dislike as a foundation. But when your children come to you and say, okay, I've worked it through, I would just want to play. I have had that moment. It's under control. I'm going to be a civil human being to the rest of the family. Okay, let's go play. Let's go do this. Let's interact with humanity. But understanding that is so key, that the child realizes that they have power internally for themselves. And it literally empowers them. And this is what you want, because they're taking steps to being a whole human being, understanding what their emotions are and how to handle them.
Yeah. Well, exactly that. And just I wanted to come back to the earlier point that you had as well, which is that, again, the word problem, when the problem with it, it's not quite the same, but it's, again, English is terrible with words. We use problem for lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
And the correct, the two terms I would say is that you either have a persona within you, which means that you're identifying with the problem. Then the problem takes on its own life.
Right.
And it gets a critical voice, and it talks to you all the time. When you got this and you got this. That's the problem. Everything else in your life, if you eschew that way and let something come up into your life. Life is long. Life is full of challenges. In every moment of now, something can happen, and you have at that moment of now a choice. You can suddenly have a problem about the moment of now come up and start talking to you about how this always happens to you and this is terrible and you should go find a manager and you should demand your rights and blah, 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 blah. That's a problem. The challenge that you're facing, maybe your flight got canceled, the challenge that you're facing right there is that you have the power to say, okay, I feel angry. Let me feel angry for I'll give myself 10 minutes just to feel angry, maybe 11. And I'm going to take a deep breath, and then I now have I'm going to go with this moment as though I had chosen it. Go with it, don't fight it. It's no longer a problem. You had your little emotion come up because you can be angry for a moment. You can let yourself be angry. You're a human being. You're angry about something.
You can feel the anger.
Feel it.
Okay, but your being state is not anger.
Exactly.
You feel the anger. See, that's there's a distinct difference between the two.
Right. You feel angry. Okay. But it's not a problem. Because if you stuff the anger down, or you be angry, as Margaret was saying, I said be angry, but I meant feel. If you say, I am angry, then all of a sudden the problem, the angry man is here. The angry woman is here. Here I am, I'm anger.
See, and you've birthed in that moment your problem.
Yes, and there it is. And then the mind will come in and says, I've got 5 other problems that need help. and here's a 6th one. Damn it, there's a 6th problem here. Now I've got 7. Where'd the other problem come from? And then you've got all these problems you have to think about. And then all your problems are saying, none of those, they've all identified. They've all taken up energy. They've all spun you in different directions. Your consciousness, within which all these things exist, is suddenly a cacophony. Mm-hmm. But instead, your flight gets canceled. Okay, anger comes out. Okay, I feel angry. That's fine. I have a challenge. Now I can is there something I can do about it? It's not a problem anymore. You're saying, well, ask the mind, is there something we can do? Yes, we could check this, we could check that, check the other thing, we try this, we try that. Still not a problem. You're using your mind for its exactly appropriate thing. It's remembering things, it's teaching you how to do things, it's looking at the situation, it's gathering facts and information. Great. Your emotions are giving they're making your heart beat a little faster. You're ready to do something. And then you say, let's try this. And you call these things up. And it's no longer a problem. You're acting in the moment of now. You're living your being. And you're also taking a moment to say, the space for my anger is there, but it's not overwhelming me. The space for my thoughts is there, but it's not overwhelming me. I'm still in the moment and I'm saying, yep, here I am. This is what's happening right now. My flight has been canceled. My mind is now going to be employed in trying to figure this out. My emotions may be employed in giving me energy. Maybe it's a little bit of anger, but I'm going to let it be. But it's going to give me focus, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to give me focus. It's going to give me some impetus to do something. And nothing can be done. It's an absolute, there's just no blessed thing that can be done. And you say, the mind, okay, there's nothing that can be done about this. Accept it. It isn't passive. You've thought about everything that could be done. You may have even tried to do a few things, but the acceptance is, this is where I am now. Become aware of the silence, because even in that chaos, there's silence everywhere around you. Let your anger go. It's done its job. There's nothing more for it to do. And all of a sudden, you're no longer having a problem. You're just, you call up your wife or your spouse, say, I'm stuck in the airport. And they say, oh, well, that's terrible. What can we do? But you're no longer being angry. You're no longer having a 7th, 8th, and 9th problem to keep track of. You're not spun off into the future. What will happen? Spun off into the past. This always happens. You're a terrible wreck. If only this, if only that. No, and that would be just chaos. And your stress hormones would be raging, and your body would be under extreme pain, and your pain body would be rising up, and you're doing nothing except feeding the problem.
Right. Yeah. Exactly that. The pain body is a good one. The pain body will rise up and will insist on being fed. So whatever issue, that it will look for an issue to get angry over or upset over. That's how pain body works. It needs a jolt.
A little trigger.
Mm-hmm. And it will look for a way to trigger so that it can get fed. So that is an interesting view if you can become aware of it and then begin to handle it through your consciousness. You just see the space and say, oh, there you are. Oh, okay. You just want to get fed again, don't you?
Right.
Okay, we're going to sit you right over here. I have a space for you right here.
Right. But you're not going to get fed. You can be there if you want to be there, but I'm not going to pay any attention to you.
Well, it wants control. So you
control.
basically say, no, I'm not letting you have control.
Right.
Because you can decide whether or not you are going to allow an emotion to take hold of you. There's a word in English, that phrase in English, where an emotion takes hold of you. Anger takes hold of you. Depression takes hold of you. Fear takes hold of you. It's like, no, I am not giving permission for this. No.
And what you just said is the most important thing. Can you say it again? The permission.
Yeah. I am not allowing fear to take hold, depression to take hold, anger to take hold. You acknowledge that they exist, but when they take hold of you, you become fear. You become anger. You become depression. And you can say, no, I am not allowing this. It takes a repetition many times to reprogram yourself out of this. Because that is a program that you accepted a long time ago and have probably reenacted over and over and over and over again, so that pattern is like a well-worn groove in your head. And just the marble is not going to go anywhere else on the marble track. It's just following the track. So to be aware, first of all, that you have a marble track called fear, or a marble track called anger. Just become aware of that first. And then make the decision that, well, I'm changing the whole thing. I'm in charge.
Well, that's exactly it. You've probably heard people say this, is that I couldn't help myself.
Oh, yeah. That's the track.
The anger came up and it just, because
possessed them,
took hold of them, as you said. But in fact, and this is based on very good science, emotions do come up unbidden. They are important that they come up unbidden, because there's a part of your physiology, a part of your mind, which is really looking out as a survival mechanism for threats of all kinds.
Right.
And so you want this to happen. You want emotions to rise up unbidden because it's important for survival. But in your awareness and in your consciousness, you have to understand that emotion, when it enters into your awareness, when you become aware, and you can become aware very early that you're having a reaction to something, anger or fear or whatever, so you become aware, it's after it has already begun. It's sometime afterwards that you are aware that the emotion is starting to try and take hold of you. But what Margaret said is extremely important. You have to, and whether you know it or not, even in your current state, even in a state of complete unawareness, you still have some level of permission. When anger rises, there's just a momentary, initially it may only seem like an instant of time where you can decide whether you're going to let yourself go into anger. And in a habit form, the well-worn groove for the marble track is that a marble comes up and you drop it in the groove. But you do get to handle the marble for that very brief period of time. Once the consciousness sees this ball of emotion, this ball of energy, it has the ability to put that marble anywhere. You can put it, instead of in the well-worn groove, into a giant bucket where it can just kind of circulate around and not do much, but it can maybe fill up the bucket. It might get bigger and bigger. But that bucket doesn't let it run all over your consciousness, drown your thoughts, roar out of your mouth, cause you to act like a crazy person. Because that's what the well-worn groove is for. It just goes right out your mouth and starts screaming. Yeah. You always have a moment of permission, and you can make it bigger and bigger. You can make it as vast as you want. You can see your emotions coming up and say, into the bucket. You bucket. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And once you develop that, and the earlier you do, the better. If you teach your children early on that yes, you will feel angry. That's a bucket. You can feel angry, and it doesn't go anywhere. You're just feeling it. It's just there. Yes, this is what anger feels like.
Yeah, the exercise I used to do at the meditations was that you're sitting at a very long table. And that long table is your consciousness. It's that space. And you're just sitting there observing. And suddenly a thought occurs. And the thought is represented by this marble. It drops onto the table. And you're not supposed to reach out and grab it. You're just supposed to observe it. And you watch it as it rolls across the table and then goes over the edge and disappears. And there's something very satisfying about watching the thing drop.
Yes. And it's gone.
And it's gone.
And guess what else is gone?
Oh, dear. Yeah.
Our hour is gone. So anyway, so you are not a problem.
No, you're not.
But your me is. And I'm Michael Lyons.
Oh, dear. And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.